Compelled speech has been a big topic of debate, even on this channel. But did you know that in the 1940s, Jehovah's Witnesses fought against compelled speech and won? They had children in public schools who were being compelled to say something, and when they refused, those children were expelled. Jehovah's Witnesses took this to court, and in 1940, the court said that the children were allowed to be expelled for not following along. But in 1943, the Supreme Court overruled this decision, citing the First Amendment, free speech, and religious freedoms. So, what were they being required to say? You might be surprised that it was the Pledge of Allegiance. I'm Dr. Kara. I'm a school psychologist. I am joined today by Mr. Goose, who is my co host, and we're going to be talking about the Pledge of Allegiance and free speech. Now, to give a little history, the pledge was first said in schools in 1892 to promote national unity and maybe to sell flags. But it evolved over time to where states started making legislation for students to say the pledge every single day before school started. Now, the pledge was a bit different back then. It didn't even mention the United States, just the overall republic, and it didn't have the under God portion in it either. It also included raising your hand towards the flag in a bit of a salute, and these things changed over time for many reasons. But once it was standardized by Eisenhower in 1954, you see the pledge that you might hear in schools to this very day. But we can't make kids say the Pledge of Allegiance. It's against their free speech rights, it's against religious freedom rights, and that is because of Jehovah's Witnesses. So after those court decisions in the 40s, kids are allowed to sit out of the pledge. They are allowed to sit quietly and just not engage with it. I mean, it takes only a couple seconds, so it's not very disruptive for children to not do so. Then something changed in 2017. Texas made a law that required students to get written permission from their parents to opt out of saying the pledge, and students that were not excused had to participate. Utah, Pennsylvania, Florida would follow suit in the next few years, and most recently, North Dakota decided to develop a similar policy. And it's really unclear what happens to you as a student if you choose not to participate and you haven't been excused. Now, for First Amendment rights, children don't have to ask their parents for permission to express them. You don't have to have written permission to wear a Jesus shirt to school or pray in school. In Ohio, students can say that intelligent design instead of evolution is how we all got here, and you don't need a permission slip to deny evolution in classroom assignments. Does getting permission to use your free speech rights mean that you even have them? If somebody can tell you no to your free speech right, it seems like it doesn't exist. And that's what we're faced with here, is this idea that if somebody can tell you no to your free speech rights, it seems like that's a pretty big infringement on those rights. So who is pushing this? Who's trying to make legislatures change their rules that have been long held to make kids say the Pledge of Allegiance? Well, if you think it's not a Christian group because they don't want compelled speech, you would be wrong. It's actually a Christian group called the America First Policy Institute. They have a position that says that all states should require students to get parent permission to opt out of the Pledge of Allegiance. And they say specifically, most other states allow for exemption without parental consent or leave oversight to the state board or school districts, making recitation of the pledge completely optional for K-12 students. We do not have the luxury of assuming our youth will automatically adopt an allegiance to America, and allowing them to opt out as early as kindergarten without parental consent misses an important opportunity to counter the disdain toward America and our rituals to which children are regularly exposed. And this seems to be saying if we don't force kids to say the pledge, they may decide for themselves that they may or may not want to say it. It's saying that if we don't force kids to have an allegiance to America, then maybe they won't do it, and that is bad. They shouldn't have the choice whether or not they have an allegiance to America. But the problem is that 1943, the Supreme Court decided that patriotism is not a good enough reason to infringe upon free speech rights. And any truly patriotic person would know that free speech is such an important right to us that we'd want to protect it against policies like this in particular. And I know somebody's out there is saying, well, you wanted teachers to say pronouns of kids against their religious beliefs. How is this any different? And it is really different. In one case, a person is infringing upon the freedoms of another person with their free speech. In another case, we're infringing upon free speech for patriotism. I find it just extremely disturbing that this group wants to show kids how great their country is and what wonderful rights are afforded to them by taking away their First Amendment rights. So watch out for this in your state because it could be coming to you pretty soon. And what's scarier to me is that this first instance came up in 2017, which means that it was probably challenged and the challenge failed, or else it wouldn't be 2025 and 8 years later, it still stands. So it could come to your area and it probably can pass legal scrutiny too. So watch out for it. Let me know. Is it happening in your state too? Thanks, everybody.